The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
The Cavs announced that Darius Garland needed surgery on his toe injury that hampered him throughout the playoffs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
That news, of course, that Cavs guard Darius Garland underwent successful surgery on Monday to repair his great toe injury. This is the Cavs statement. The procedure was performed by Dr. Nicholas Strasser at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in consultation with Cavaliers team doctor, Dr. James Rosnek, and Dr. Bob Anderson. His status will be updated as appropriate following a progression of treatment and rehabilitation in approximately 4 to 5 months. Garland is expected to make a full recovery and resume basketball activities by the start of training camp. So this news obviously means that Darius Garland was more injured than I think he was letting on, than the Cavs were letting on, than anybody really knew during that postseason run. And after the Cavs lost to the Pacers, a big part of the conversation was that, well, injuries are not an excuse. They're not. The Cavs should have found a way as a 64-win team with 2 top 10 players in the NBA this season to find a way to win that series. Not giving them an excuse for that. And of course, give the Pacers a lot of credit. They're currently 1-1 in the NBA Finals, which nobody saw happening prior to the season starting. But I think that the way this Garland injury has turned out to be clearly much more serious than anybody, I think, certainly externally, and I believe internally too at the time. Like, I don't think that when Darius re-injured this toe in game 2 against the Miami Heat in the first round, I don't think anyone internally looked at this and said, yeah, he's probably going to need surgery 6 weeks from now, because that's kind of what the timeline is. That game was about 6 weeks ago. So I don't think at that time anybody thought that it would have been this type of an injury. It very clearly did change the way Garland played. And I think that this is an injury that we should be able to look at and maybe change the narrative a bit on Darius Garland as a postseason player, because there's a lot of noise that Garland is not somebody that rises to the moment. And I think a lot of that, like, while you can't necessarily prove that wrong in the postseason, I think a lot of it can be explained. And I think that this injury, because you go back and look at what he did in those first 2 games against Miami Heat, and even then, I really struggle to put a ton of stock into that, just because the Miami Heat, like, those did not necessarily feel like playoff games. They didn't feel like they were big games. They kind of just felt like, oh, you know, the Cavs are playing a couple of games that are an extension of the regular season. But in those 2 games, Garland scored 27 points in game 1. He had a very nice game, 10 of 17 shooting, 5 of 9 from 3, looked really good. He had a very good game. Game 2, 6 of 14, just 2 of 8 from 3, so not as great of a game, but got to the line 8 times, made 7 of them, had 9 assists and just 1 turnover. Like, he looked in those 2 games like Darius Garland. And then he comes back and plays in the final 3 games against the Indiana Pacers, and he looks nothing like Darius Garland. He could not shoot the basketball very well. He could not move very well. Like, that was the thing that stood out to me, is that Darius Garland, in the games that he played against the Indiana Pacers, did not look like a guy that should be playing playoff basketball. It looked like that toe injury was bothering him a lot. And I think that the fact this news comes out now on Monday, June 9th, does help to explain a lot of it. And I think that this is something that should change the narrative about Darius as a postseason player. Because for me, I look at this and say, that guy really went out there and played through an injury he probably shouldn't be playing through. Because we are at this point now, and I want to look up the exact date, just so I know exactly how far away we are from the Cavs being eliminated. It was, I believe, May 13th was their final game of the playoffs. That was game 5 against the Pacers. It was a Tuesday. So that will be 4 weeks ago tomorrow, the 10th, when the Cavs stopped playing basketball. The fact that this injury was still enough of a burden that 4 weeks later he needed to undergo surgery I think explains the severity of it. And of course, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to be a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to know the ins and outs of this injury. But it's hard for me to imagine that if 4 weeks after the season ended, if it's been 4 weeks just about since he's played basketball, because I'm going to assume that Darius Garland has not done very much this offseason if he is having surgery on this at this point. I would think, and I'm again assuming, so maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm going to assume that a lot of his postseason stuff was rest and recovery and trying to get it right, and it didn't get right, and that's why he needed surgery. That would be my best guess. But for that to be the case, for this injury to be as significant as it was, it is hard, and I hate to do this because I don't like giving free passes away, but it's hard for me to look at that series against the Pacers and hold that against Darius. The guy was playing on a pretty significant injury that could cost him part of next season, because the injury update the Cavs put out said 4 to 5 months. Now, they also said he's expected to be ready for the start of training camp, but 3 months from now is September 9th. That is about the time when teams start getting together and start doing stuff to prepare for training camp, right? Like we heard last season or last media day, Kobe Altman, what did he say? He called Ty Jerome the MVP of September. That stuff starts around Labor Day weekend. Labor Day is September 1st this year. That is when you will start to hear reports or see reports, or you'll see stuff on Instagram about, oh, the Cavs all gathered. Donovan Mitchell hosted the Cavs in New York City. In previous years, Darius Garland has hosted the Cavs in Nashville. Maybe Evan Mobley will be hosting the Cavs in Los Angeles in September. And they will have, I don't know the best way, like they will have team organized activities is the best way to kind of term it. Darius is not most likely going to be able to take part in those. So 4 months puts you at September 9th, or no, 3 months put you at September 9th. 4 months put you at October 9th. Training camp's going to start before then. So I don't know if the timetable is 4 to 5 months, I do think, and the Cavs said they expect him to be ready for training camp, but those two timelines don't exactly line up. So let's say that he's not ready until 5 months. That puts you at November 9th, which you are well into the regular season at that point. Now, of course, if he misses 5 or 10 games at the start of the regular season, considering what the goals are for the Cavs and just what they aim to be next year, I don't think him missing time at the start of the season is going to be something that matters all that much. I think that we can look at this and say, yes, as long as he is right and healthy for the postseason, that is what matters. And that is the truth, because as they have all said following this season, the only thing they're going to be judged on next year, and I kind of think that's how this year was too, but next year is going to be pushed to a more extreme level. The only thing they're going to be judged on is what they do in the playoffs. Are they going to be a team that succeeds in the playoffs? Are they going to be a team that doesn't succeed in the playoffs? That's the only thing that's going to matter. Whether or not they get off to a 15-0 start next year in October, November isn't going to matter. Nobody's going to care. But Darius's injury could realistically bleed into the regular season. So I think if the injury is this bad, should this impact how we look at what Darius did in the playoffs, what the Cavs did in the playoffs? Because I have spent so much time over the last couple of weeks saying that the injuries mattered in this series, and they did. Darius was playing on one foot. He had an injury that was bad enough that 4 weeks after the season ended, he still needed to get surgery. And it's not as if it's just a surgery that he's going to be ready in a month. It's not a minor thing. I really don't think there is such a thing as minor surgeries. Like anytime that you are knocked out and put under the knife, I tend to think it's a pretty big deal. So I would like to classify this as not being a minor deal. Now, this doesn't make it okay that the Cavs lost in the second round against the Pacers. But I think that knowing that the injury was this severe, this significant, should start to color the way we look at that series. And the last thing I want to do is take away credit from the Pacers. But I think it's a little bit easier to look at this and say, man, was this postseason more about the Cavs' failures, or was it more about they got some really bad luck at the worst time? Because while I don't think it's ever just one thing, and it's not just the injuries, there was a lot that went into it. But the more I look at this and I see Darius Garland's injury, how significant it was, And knowing that, watching that series, at all times when they were struggling, it felt like, man, if they had a healthy Darius Garland to relieve a lot of the pressure that the Indiana Pacers were putting on them, you feel differently about the Cavs. Donovan Mitchell was hurt. Evan Mobley was hurt. And Darius Garland had a pretty significant injury.
Ever check your bank account and wonder where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The Hawks add two pretty big hires to the front office and add some, I would say, clarity to the situation in the front office.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast.
In the late morning hours of Monday, there was some clarity and some reporting done on the Hawks front office search. That is certainly the biggest development in quite some time. So if you might remember this, dating back to April 21st, the Hawks have been kind of in limbo. They fired Landry Fields on April 21st. It's now June 9th. It's been 6-7 weeks as they had this search going for a president of basketball operations. And really, just in general, it's been kind of quiet. There's been reporting on who they were interviewing, all those things, but kind of especially in the last couple of weeks, pretty quiet on this front. Now, Shams Charania reports on Monday morning that the Hawks are going to be hiring Pelicans executive Bryson Graham as Senior Vice President of Basketball Operations and 76ers executive Pierre Dinwiddie as Senior Vice President of Strategy and Analytics. So these are not officially announced as I record this on Monday afternoon. Keep that in mind. But I can confirm, I would say I have triple confirmation now. These are happening. These hires are happening. They've not been announced, but Shams reports, I confirm they're out there. And again, Shams said it first. I can also confirm that Graham and Dinwiddie are both going to be working under Hawks General Manager Ansi Saleh. That's an important distinction. When this was kind of just first tweeted out by Shams, people were kind of like, all right, what's going on here? Are they hiring someone above Ansi? No, I can, again, confirm that Graham and Dinwiddie are both working under Ansi Saleh on the organizational chart. So as of right now, the number one person on the basketball operations organizational chart for the Hawks is Ansi Saleh, who, if you missed it, back on April 21st, was hired as the permanent general manager. And not to do the whole spiel again, some organizations, including the Hawks, go back and forth on this. Sometimes the GM is the number one person in the organization. Sometimes they're number two person in the organization if they have a president of basketball operations. Travis Schlenk was both. He was the GM as the number one and then was promoted as the number one still to president. Landry Fields was the GM as number one, was never promoted to the top spot and as far as the theoretical top spot. But in the meantime, the person running basketball operations has been Ansi Saleh for the last 6 weeks, and he is still currently number one on the call sheet for the Hawks. Now, I will also say this. There's been discussion about what was going to happen here, whether this kind of ends the search for the Hawks, etc. So lots of things to get to. And then, by the way, at the end of the podcast, I'll get into kind of what more of these guys, Bryson Graham and Pierre Dinwiddie, are going to be adding to the Hawks organization. But in the meantime, Shams included a reference at the end of his piece that he wrote on ESPN about this, that, quote, any potential president hire for the Hawks will be made to complement Saleh and his staff, end quote. So that does not shut the door on a search for a president of basketball operations, or a POBO, as I've been shortening it to, that could be hired above Ansi. Also, Lauren Williams, good friend of the podcast of the AJC, reported from a source that the search has not yet concluded for a president. I have, for the record, never said that they've stopped searching for a president at any point. And I'll say that again now. They've left the door open. That seems purposeful to me that they're leaving the door open. Now, what I will say quickly here is that I will now be quite surprised if the Hawks hire a president of basketball operations. One more time. I'll be surprised. I'm not saying that they definitely will not at all, but I will be surprised if the Hawks make a hire above Ansi this summer. That's where I am at this point in time. Now, if you missed any of this in the past, or if you're a new listener, first of all, welcome aboard. Second of all, the first day that this was all out there, Tony Ressler put out a pretty aggressive quote and proclamation press release about how they were going to be searching for a high-level, experienced executive to hire as president of basketball operations. They didn't have to do that, but Tony did it, which was a little bit interesting to me. Again, didn't have to do that. But I said on that first episode, the emergency podcast from that day, that I had heard that Auntie Salah, I said Salah at that point in time, Auntie Saleh now, as I know how to say his name better, Auntie Saleh would be the number one guy potentially at the end. Like, there was a scenario in which Auntie was not the president, but was still the number one person by the end of the process. Throughout this process, that's been kind of in the background. Last week, I said that I thought it was the most likely outcome. So for the first time, I went from like possible to likely in my reporting and my estimated, intel a week ago. Now I have moved to, again, flat out expecting Auntie to be the number one person. Again, I am not reporting that it is 100% going to be Auntie as the number one person. Maybe the Hawks have a card up their sleeve that no one I have talked to or speculated with or talked to around the league is thinking of. Maybe they have a home run hire that they just can't make yet. That's all possible. Maybe Tim Conley, who's going to be a free agent if he wants to be, he has an option in Minnesota. If he opted out, I'm sure the Hawks will make a call to Tim Conley. My Riem situation has always been, and is even firmer now, that the Hawks maybe had a guy, 2, maybe 3, that they were kind of dreaming on and hoping to get. And once they couldn't get those people, or at least they haven't gotten those people, the chances of Auntie being the number one person increased, because look, Auntie Saleh is very qualified, very smart, very well respected. He's well compensated, all of those things. It's a very reasonable choice to be the number one person in the organization. I've seen, or I always hear people that don't know him. That's what it is. If you're, most of the time, executives in the NBA, if they have not been a number one, fans and regular people do not know them. And that, by the way, you shouldn't need to know them. They're just in the background. Auntie is one of those people that you wouldn't know. He's never been like interviewed or talked on the record or been the number one person. So I get the skepticism. I really do. But from what I can glean, what I've talked to, heard, etc., very smart guy, very qualified guy, very respected guy. But let's say all that to say, I'll be surprised now if he is not number one on the call sheet heading into next season. Now, of course, number one on the call sheet does not take into account that Tony Ressler is active as an owner. It does not take into account that Nick Ressler, Tony's son, is still in the mix. Those things are all out there, so that's almost separate. It's not separate, never can be, but it's almost separate. But if you look at the basketball operation structure, Auntie's number one on the list right now. And if you were going to go with Auntie, if you were going to do that, these are the kind of moves that you would do, in my opinion. You would bring in 2 very experienced front office executives with high-level acumen. They've seen a lot of things. They have different strengths, all of that. I'll discuss both guys more in a minute, but both have great reputations that I've heard more and more about in the last couple hours since this news broke this morning, in the midst of me throwing on a t-shirt and trying to record on my lunch hour on a Monday. But really, really strong reputations in the league that I've heard about both these people. I've never met either of them to my knowledge. I've heard positive things before this. So it's not like just blowing smoke now, but, reaching out to people that know these people, that have covered these people, talk to them. Pretty much a universal approval rating for these executives. Does that mean they're perfect hires? We don't know that right now, but that's just what we can know at the outset. So I think it makes total sense to bring in some fresh views and some experience to complement Auntie Saleh. But you're also empowering him as the number one person in this scenario. If he's the guy, you want to have him have people that are experienced under him, because he is a first-time executive. And even if he wasn't, even if he was the guy they hired in the first place from the outside or whatever, if you're hiring a first-time GM or POBO or whatever it's going to be, you would want them to have their number 2, number 3, somebody in the organization that's done this before, or at least have experience in a lot of different ways. And again, you can make the pessimistic point about Tony and Nick. That puts a damper on things. I get all that. I promise you I do. But you now have a guy that I believe is very qualified to be number one, if you want to have him do that in Auntie. You have a guy in Bryson Graham who is basically doing the same number 2 job that he had with the Pelicans, as we'll get into more in a second. You have a guy, Pierre Dinwiddie, who's been working at a high level for offices for well over a decade. He was a key figure in Indiana, a key figure in Philadelphia, etc. And then you also have Kyle Korver, who's still there, assistant GM, and a guy who's in player development. Kyle's a smart guy. People below them that you would never think about, whether it's in the in the cap side of things or in the scouting side of things, development side of things, people that are down the organizational chart that are valuable people, the Hawks have a coherent and I think pretty solid front office structure right now without doing anything else. They have a qualified number 1, a qualified number 2, a qualified 3 and 4. Like, you're in good shape there, I believe.
There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. With Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Can the Pacers recover? How will it look in games 3 and 4 as the series shifts to Indy?
You are Locked On NBA Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It's a 1-1 series, an epic start in OKC. The Thunder will now try to steal one in Indy as the series shifts to Indianapolis starting on Wednesday. Tyrese Halliburton heroics, thing of the past. The Thunder dominated Game 2 of the series, as you've well known, because it's been a full day since, and we're now together to break down how it happened. That OKC defense, wow. The Pacers bench, yikes. Can the Thunder keep this up like they have against other teams, or will the Pacers respond like they have in every game since March? Two teams that love to not lose twice in a row. How will inertia sort itself out? Rylan, I have the first tab on our discussion today. Thunder even up the series by playing their way, and what I mean by that is this game kind of felt like what I thought their blueprint would be in the series. Their defense cuts off a lot of the stuff the Pacers are good at, and it allows them to score easily. Did you kind of feel the same way about that game?
Yeah, I thought that the game 2 was a much better showing for OKC, obviously, but more consistent. I mean, they truly stuck to their identity and who they were. Defensively, they were swarming. They caused Indiana to look out of sorts at times and really force them into difficult shots. And the Pacers are great at making tough shots, but you have to at least make them work for it, which OKC did. And they were able to play faster off of the stops that they stacked up, which allowed them to pull away from Indiana, which has been the theme of this postseason, of this regular season. This has been who the Thunder have been since October, and the Thunder really thrived playing faster against Indiana, getting stops, and making shots. I mean, like, part of it was just simply shot making. I mean, I know it's kind of elementary to point that out, but the Thunder generated good shot qualities, and you had Wiggins and Caruso knock them down. Whereas in game 1, your offense was just, Shea, Lou Dort, and I heart putbacks. Like, that was your whole offense. And in game 2, it was much more fluid, and they attacked a lot better offensively, which coupled with a really good defensive effort.
Yeah, I thought all that was certainly true. The flow was more there. I mean, the famous stat in Indiana is now that Alex Caruso has more 20-point games than any Pacer in the playoffs, which is just completely wild. Or in the playoffs, in the finals, which is just completely wild. The thing that continues to stand out to me that I want to kind of pick your brain on, the Pacers stylistically have always wanted to be a great paint team. Not always just that because of scoring in the paint, but playing from the paint now. They call it paint to great. Every time Tyrese Halliburton has a game like game 2, he says, I got to get deeper in the paint. And they can't. 34 points in the paint in both games this series. That's 2 points away from their lowest of the playoffs or regular season, both 32 for them. And obviously the Thunder are very good at this. One of the Pacers' worst paint games the regular season was against OKC. I can tell you the boring answer of, like, their individual defenders are awesome, but, like, what do the Thunder do so well to keep teams out of the paint? And what strategies or teams have had success kind of cracking that? Because the Pacers could really use it as the series keeps going.
Yeah, the Thunder have taken the style of taking away the paint against every team for the last 2 years, of just clogging the lane and swarming to the paint once the ball gets inside. And so I think that with the Thunder, you typically see NBA defenses either try to take away the three-point line or the painted area. And the Thunder have understood that the three-point line in and of itself is very volatile. Like whether you have a contest out there or not, if you just let these guys shoot wide open threes, they're susceptible to going in and out because that's the way the ball bounces and that's the way basketball works. Whereas the paint is the highly efficient shot that if you let guys into the paint with ease, then not only are you letting out the most efficient shot in basketball with layups and dunks and high leverage floaters, but you're leaving yourself open to kickouts and great looks from beyond the arc. So the Thunder for the last 2 years have prioritized getting into the paint. And one way that they are able to do it is by disguising their defense. And we typically talk about this in football a lot, but it happens in basketball too, where the paint can look open for a moment, but the second the ball leaves your hand for an entry pass into the post, you have SGA leaping behind somebody's back to tap it out. You have Cason Wallace streaking down from the break to get into the paint and to swarm at the ball and swat at the ball. And you just all of a sudden turn to the basket and you're turning into traffic. And the Thunder are really good at whenever they're facing post-ups, and Pascal Siakam has been a guy that could thrive in post-ups, whenever they have a guy on his back at the catch point, and the second he receives the ball, he's got to have to turn to the basket or give the ball right back to the guard. So whenever you can anticipate where he's going to turn and make sure you have an additional body there, that's where the Thunder have gotten teams into trouble. I think that if you can find a way to get into the paint with 2 feet with your lead ball handler and then spray it out efficiently to the corners, that's where you've been able to see some success happen against Oklahoma City. But the dirty little secret is there's a very few guys, and Halliburton is one of them, but there's very few guys talented enough to navigate through that traffic, touch the paint, and make the pass, because there's so many different layers to that onion against this Thunder defense. First of all, you've got to get past these elite defenders who have elite lateral quickness and elite footwork that can stop you and hinder you from getting where you want to go. You have to make it through the pass. The pass to the corner has to make it through just 50 arms in the passing lanes and very great anticipatory off-ball defenders. And then you have to make the shot once you receive that corner pass from beyond the arc. So there's a lot that goes into it. But the Thunder have certainly prioritized the paint. They prioritized entry passes. And then it comes down to, if you can't throw the entry pass to the post, the only other way to get there is by dribbling there. And if you put the ball on the deck too much against this Thunder team, they have 50 million cookie monsters to take the ball away. So what do you do?
Yeah, that's the two things you said in there that have stood out the most to me as issues is Halliburton, in theory, fits the bill of a guy who can hit that pass, because that's something I've said is, even though the Thunder are giving up that weak side corner, how many guys can actually make that skip pass? And not only make it, but for it to actually be threatening, it's got to be on time, on target. If not, they'll just be able to recover in time anyway. But he hasn't been able to get into the paint enough. And a lot of times when he does, he's burping up a floater, and that's good. His self-creating a floater is good, but it's not creating enough of the good shots. The other guys haven't been able to make the pass or haven't been able to make the play in the paint, and that's why the Thunder are so good. And the second part of it that I think has struck me in this series is just the individual defenders make it so hard, right? You mentioned their lateral quickness. They have so many guys who can wall off the ball handler that they can't get in just naturally via a couple dribble moves, even against some of the lesser defenders, to break down the defense and just spray it out and keep someone else getting in there. It's been so hard to break that first line and get them in rotation, which is what the Pacers have been so good at in the playoffs, right? There's that clip from game 2 of Halliburton telling Siakam, keep stealing, I'll get you the ball. And that's what they hope. That was great in game 1. It's hard to do that against the Thunder. They clog up those entry pass lanes. It just hasn't been there. And I think that's been a big part of taking away the heart of the Pacers and what the Thunder deserve a lot of credit for, because that's their heart. It's their defense clogging up a place that everybody wants to get and make it so they're going to lose by jump shots or lose, by whatever, extremely crisp interior passing or just something different, because the Pacers haven't looked themselves. And I think the Thunder playing that way is why the series is even now.
Yeah, and I think another thing that they do defensively is their screen navigation is if you bring somebody to the ball, first of all, there's no one to bring to the ball that is a bad defender or a negative defender who's on the court. I mean, outside of the Wiggins minutes where you would like a Wiggins switch defensively, with no offense to Wiggins, but he's clearly the worst defender on the floor in the lineups that he's with. But, there's no mismatch to hunt. And so all you're doing is bringing an additional defender to the ball for a team that is notorious for getting over screens and never dying on them. And then whoever the ball handler is now has to play in traffic. And if he can make that swing pass to the slipper from the screen, either you live with the 3-point shot that you get, or that slight hesitation lets them recover and fly back out because the Thunder are so comfortable, even switching guards onto bigs, including Siakam and Turner. to where you just never can find footing in terms of advantages. Like if you were to script up a perfect game plan, like if you were saying, regardless of the Thunder, this is going to work, this is what they should do. What is it? Like, what would you want them to try to do? When you close your eyes in Indiana and envision a perfect game 3 where they win and take a 2-1 series lead, what do you envision them exploiting with this Thunder defense? It's very tough to have the answer even right now, just hypothetically talking about it, much less in the moment.
17 threes again? It's probably
it's just a barrage of threes.
They've got guys who can do it.
They do.
So
and that's why I don't think it'll be a short series.